Genesis 17, an exegetical and biblical theological commentary. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Room Apologetics. Today we're diving into Genesis chapter 17, an exegetical and biblical theological commentary. I'm Mark Bates. Genesis 17 marks a monumental epical transition in the progressive unfolding of the divine promise plan. Following Abram and Sarai's fleshly attempt to secure an heir through the so-called Hagar plan in Genesis 16, Yahweh condescends to formally reaffirm and significantly expand his covenantal promises. Within the broader biblical framework, particularly the divine Counsel worldview, this chapter reinforces Yahweh's intent to reclaim the nations that were disinherited at Babel. By expanding Abram's localized promise into a global fatherhood of a multitude of nations, God establishes the permanent historical mechanism by which he will restore unmediated divine presence and universal blessing to the cosmos. Section 1. The name change and the expansion of the promise, verses 1 through 8. Yahweh appears to Abram, declaring himself to be God Almighty, El Shaddai, and commanding him to walk blamelessly before him. God then changes Abram's name to Abraham, signifying that he will be the father of a multitude of nations. This fatherhood of many nations will ultimately be manifest through an earthly royal descendant who will bear global influence and rule. The covenant and the promised land are explicitly declared to be eternal, guaranteeing that God will fulfill his purposes for both the Abrahamic progeny and the physical property. Section 2. Circumcision as the covenantal sign, verses 9 through 14. God institutes circumcision as the mandatory physical marker of the covenant community. In the text's own logic, circumcision functions strictly as a sign of the covenant, rather than its defining condition. Because the promised son is the key element to the success of the covenant, this sign is attached to the organ of procreation. The cutting away of the flesh symbolizes that the true heir will arrive not by the flesh, such as human efforts like the Hagar plan, but through divine means alone. Section 3. The promise of Isaac and the rejection of the flesh, verses 15 through 27. God changes Sarai's name to Sarah and explicitly promises that she, despite her barrenness, will bear a son named Isaac. While Ishmael is blessed and protected by God, maintaining his own concrete historical significance, he is explicitly rejected as the vehicle for the ultimate covenantal promises. Abraham's immediate obedience in circumcising his household demonstrates his submission to the reality that the covenant relies entirely upon God's supernatural provision. New Testament appropriations of Genesis 17. The apostolic writers organically trace the promises made in Genesis 17 to their ultimate realization in the person and work of Jesus Christ, emphasizing justification by faith and the eschatological expansion of the covenant family. In Romans chapter 4, verses 16 and 17, Paul explicitly draws upon Genesis 17, verse 5, to affirm that the promised inheritance depends on faith and rests on grace. This guarantees it to all offspring, not only to the adherent of the law, but also to the one who shares the faith of Abraham, who is the father of a multitude of nations. In Galatians chapter 3, verse 16, Paul identifies Christ as the singular ultimate fulfillment of the seed promised to Abraham, through whom the global blessing of the nations is secured. Theological synthesis. Read through the lens of Walter C. Kaiser Jr.'s Promise Plan Theology. Genesis 17 resists both the artificial discontinuities of classical dispensationalism and the over-spiritualization often found in covenant theology. The covenant established here is an organic, unfolding guarantee. The physical sign of circumcision and the promise of the physical seed, Isaac, point directly to the ultimate miraculous arrival of the Messiah. This chapter proves that God's redemptive strategy is fundamentally non-supersessionist. The concrete promises of land and lineage originally given to ethnic Israel remain intact and eternal. Simultaneously, the promise plan expands, incorporating believers from all nations into the one family of Abraham through faith in the Messiah, thereby achieving the cosmic restoration and universal blessing intended from the beginning. That's our look at Genesis 17 today. If this encouraged you or helped deepen your understanding of the promise plan, please subscribe, like, comment, and share. Check out the full article on Substack for more details, citations, and related content. Thanks for listening, and may the Lord bless you as you walk blamelessly before Him.